Welcome to today's session for the Local Champions Pilot. I'm going to be presenting tools for engaging with your community, and very excited to get started. But first, let's have Dan give our Indigenous land acknowledgement.
Sure. So I greet you from the town of Snakewater, actually, because that seems to be the best translation into Mohican of the name Copake. Not sure why it was named Snakewater, but this was Mohican land, and their confederacy was bordered by the Catskills on the west, kind of a line through Red Hook, actually, I think, was the southern border. The Housatonic, and then all the way up to Lake George, apparently, was part of Mohican Confederacy. And the council seat was at Shodak, which is right along the Hudson. They also seem to have been, of all the tribes that Hudson met in 1609, they seem to have had been on the best terms with Hudson. There was some trading that went on, and one Indian came aboard the Half Moon and got drunk, apparently, which was not a good beginning, maybe in that way. But and let's see, and right where I live in Copake Village, used to be called Copake Flats because there's a lot of flat land here, right by the mountains, and that seems to have been a Mohican village actually since way back, and also up by Copake Lake. And one little detail I picked up when I was reading about this too, that was very poignant, I thought, is that apparently in as late as sometime in the 19th century, there were Mohicans who would return. They had by that point been driven out into the Midwest, but they would return to Copake Lake and be there in the summer, meaning that they still felt the connection and some ownership of that land. So there was still Mohican visitors in the 19th century who would kind of come and go. So raise a toast to them.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
So thank you to all of you who were able to take that that survey that I sent. And I tried to design this session to be responsive to where each of you are at, each of you in our cohort. And here's the thing, I want to set you up to start working with these tools. So I want you to get ready to start using the tools, putting them into action, because you will be doing presentations. In 2 weeks from today, our Thursday session will be devoted to your presentation. So you each give a 10-minute presentation showing us what you've put together. And so you're welcome to work individually or buddy up, get feedback from each other in the coming 2 weeks. And I will get more into the details of your assignment for those presentations, but consider this session really the kickoff of that, culminating in your presentations. So today, the tools I'm going to talk about are websites, social media, and email newsletters. These are really the tools that I think any CSC task force coordinator should know about, be familiar with. And we're going to start with what their greater purpose is, and then go on to some of the basics of how you actually use the tools. And then, of course, I'll be talking about the assignments that are flowing from this presentation. So let's just start with why, especially like why social media. Oh, do I have to? Like it's I don't know, it can, and social media can feel like it's not my cup of tea, or maybe, you know, the idea of building a website or managing an email newsletter seems intimidating or complex. But I'm really here to say that these tools are important because you all are trying to do the work. You're trying to do this climate work that's so important. And we want you to be able to amplify that out beyond just you and your town board and maybe your task force, to reach out into your community and be able to amplify your work and activate others in your community. And that is getting back to climate smart communities. You know, it's about the community connection there. And and these tools are really going to be the way that you do it. So here's a crazy graphic that I made. The point here is to show all of these interconnection points between these tools, because really what you're trying to do is create a whole kind of virtuous cycle of interaction. You know, say someone happens upon an event that you're doing in the community, you get them to sign up for your newsletter, and they get the newsletter, and you talk about some other project, and you link them through to your website, and they explore your website, and they like what you got going on, and then they see that you do social media, you're linked up there on your website, they go follow you on your social media, and then they share it with their friends, and then, you know, more people find out about it. So, you know, you're really creating this web of multiple connection points, and they should all be reinforcing each other. Here's my little spider on the web. Or to use another kind of cheesy metaphor, be the pebble, creating ripples in the pond, amplifying out your actions and your information, and creating waves of participation. So, for example, you know, ask your task force members, if you're doing a project or doing an event where you need volunteers, ask them to ask their friends to volunteer, right? And then those friends say they have a great time volunteering, it's a volunteer opportunity for them. Ask them to share it on their social media, right? And then soon you're gaining more followers. And, you know, maybe it will prompt them to chat with their neighbor about what you're up to. And then that also flows back again, right? So say you're doing social media and you've got followers of followers liking what you're doing. Somebody's going to stumble upon that, and then they're going to follow you, and then they're going to hear about something that you're doing and RSVP and show up, and then maybe they'll sign up for your newsletter and hear about another project that they're interested in and reach out to you and end up, you know, being a task force member. So this is really like the network effect, is creating all these connections, which then can exponentially spur on more connections. So really, this is my spiel. You want to catch attention, inform, and always be inviting people to get involved. And you're really, again, we're trying to create this whole system with these tools that each reinforces the other pieces. So that's just the introduction here. Now we're going to actually get into these tools, and I've broken this presentation into 3 sections, and after each section we'll do some discussion. And just a heads up with social media, we're just going to dip our toe in those waters. We're not going to go super in depth with social media. But let's start up with websites. So the vision for you is to have an appealing way to present compelling, usable info and events to your public. And I know it's easier said than done, but we're going to help you get started. And why get started with a website or a web page? You know, you could start with social media, or you could start with an email newsletter. But I'm suggesting you start with you prioritize having a web page or a website, because it's truly public. Not everyone's going to be on social media. Not everyone's going to be subscribed to your email newsletter. So this is a place where everyone can reach you, and that's really the essence of our form of government. Is it's public, it's transparent, and that's part of it. That's part of what you're doing as a municipal program, and the other thing is, like, I think it makes you look a little bit more you know, you look kind of more professional if you could just have like a Facebook public page for your climate smart community work, but having a website or a web page makes it look a little bit more legit. So let's start by kind of teaching to the test here. Here's what the Climate Smart Communities program has to say about your web presence. Note that it's not mandatory to have a website, or as they call it, a local climate action website or web page. It's not mandatory, but I'm really encouraging you to do this, because again, to your community, it's going to signal that your town is taking this seriously and that this is a real thing. And it's going to enable you to get your message out and really energize your community. So, and really what they require to get points, it's only 3 points. But what they require is it's not that much. You only have to update it at least once a year prior to your filing. And then what you're doing is you're describing the projects that the local government is undertaking or has done. You know, you could pull from your certification assessment for that. And then you can talk about how local residents and businesses can participate in those town efforts. And then thirdly, a summary of actions or ideas that people can integrate into their own lives, their homes, or in their own businesses, and just generally educate them about climate change and how to take action and reduce greenhouse gas emissions or adapt to climate change in their own lives. So let's take a look and see what our results were of the survey that you all did. We're obviously not all at the same place. I didn't get a clear signal of what to address. But I think what this is showing us is that we're all at a little bit of different points when it comes to handling our web presence. And Chow, I know, is maybe our superstar among us, and I'm hoping Chow could maybe chat a bit with us in the Q&A part of this section about the website that that she just launched. But some of you are going to do a standalone site, but it's not quite built yet, and some are just doing a web page. And so I thought it might be helpful just to kind of give like a visual walkthrough of what our different towns are doing. So here we have town of Hurley. Okay, so Christian, this is what we got going on. I wasn't able to find any info for climate smart communities on the Hurley website. But if you were to have a page on the Hurley website, you would click on the boards and committees, and then here on this page, you would have a link for Climate Smart Communities Task Force, right? And then when you click through to that, you would have to address those 3 elements that the action requires. If you were to have a standalone website, you would have maybe a button on that says like, here's what Climate Smart Communities is about, here's what we're doing, but click here to go off-site and visit our dedicated website. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. Copake is a very similar situation, right? Where I didn't yet find anything about climate smart communities. I would assume it would be one of these links listed here under boards and committees. That's the idea. Town of Unionville's website is a little bit different in that they don't have that kind of like nested, I think what they call accordion drop down. They call this kind of like an accordion drop down navigation in web design lingo. They just have all these buttons right here at the top of their website. But lucky Jen, you could have a nice fat button right in the top center for climate smart communities, because these are all just alphabetically listed. And so Germantown, you do have a page already for your Climate Smart Communities website, or for your page for the task force, which is great. And you have your list of task force members down here. But there's more that can be done with this page if you want to get points for the program, and we'll talk more about that. Also, I just wanted to note, it really is a good idea to be looking at your web presence, not just on your browser, on your desktop or on your laptop, but also on your phone or your iPad. I used to work for a web company, and we went through this whole really intense phase where we were pushing our designers and our computer programmers to design mobile first, really anticipating that most people in the future are going to be looking at your content on their phone or on their tablet. So we really need to be mindful of that. And so I think that probably some of the town websites aren't designed with that in mind. So that might be another element for you to consider. Why it might be a good idea to have a standalone website, because you really want, in order to engage with people and activate them and get them involved, you want to create a design experience that's easy to use and meet people where they are, and where people are at is on their phones. The cool thing about a Squarespace or WordPress is those platforms, as design platforms, they already do what they call responsive design. So your job is to pick a template and pop in the content, but the platform itself will automatically translate the designs to mobile, and it will know, your website will know whether someone is looking at your website on their computer or on their phone. So that's pretty cool. That's kind of like built into some of these new web platforms, like a Squarespace or a WordPress. So drum roll, please. Huge congrats to Chow. Yay. Congratulations. It's so amazing. Chow, how do you feel? Feeling good?
It's sort of like a friend of mine, she just had a baby, and somebody said to her, "Oh, Joyce, what was it like having your baby?" And she said, "Don't kid yourself. That was the worst pain I ever had in my whole life." So doing a website was a huge job. Ours is WordPress because that's what our volunteers were able to deal with, but we did hire a pro to set it up properly for us in the beginning. And so the task force members just do the updating.
Okay. Okay, great.
But we've discovered that it's a really important platform for us to then put a lot of stuff that actually accomplishes CSC action. So it's
Right. That's right.
It's where we're putting everything.
That's right. It's really it is your home base, right? And I just wanted to point out a couple things about Chow's new website that I love. One, I love climatesmartmillerton.org, great URL. And I love the big pictures, the colors are pretty. It's large type, easy for especially our seniors to be able to read. I love that you even have a logo, which is a cool branding element that you can use through your social media and through your email newsletter. I also want to point out the really fantastic navigation. So if you think back to the elements that CSC requires, one of the things is, what can individuals do? What can families do? What can businesses do to take action? And here you have a button that says do something, right? And you break it out by group. So I think that's really fantastic, and it speaks. I could see how you were really being mindful of what you were doing. This is what that Village of Millerton site looks like on mobile. But yeah, and I was thinking, like, if you are doing for both village and town, maybe this is where you could have a page on the Village of Millerton site.
Yep.
Okay. So to standalone, or to be on, or to, just do the web page on the official site. And I feel like from looking at the survey, some people are still in a little bit of a muddle about this. And I think that makes sense. If you were doing your own independent climate change club, of course you would have your own website, but this is a municipal program again. So so I think that's why we're in a bit of a muddle as to whether to remain just under the auspices of the local government or not. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit and unpack that. So because the idea here is we want you to be able to set yourself up for long-term success, right? And so in terms of just going with a web page on the municipal site, it's great in that it will look very official. And you might even get like a more of a cross section of your town, people who would happen to be going to the town website anyways, and then get more eyeballs on the fact that you're doing climate smart as a town. Maybe it's a way of getting beyond just preaching to the choir. So that might be interesting. But as Chow, you mentioned, just getting those official websites updated is often a challenge. And of course, then you are also trying to fit your design, your content into a pre-existing design, which can be like a little bit of a puzzle sometimes. Whereas if you do a standalone website, you have that creative control over the look and feel, however many pages you want to do. And you can update it whenever you want, instantaneously. So there's no real process or lag with getting your content up. If you have a lot going on, that can be really helpful. And also it lets you just focus on that climate work and create an experience that speaks to people who are interested in the climate work. Now, in terms of drawbacks for doing a standalone website, you might find that your town supervisor or board might be a bit nervous, like in some senses it's easier for them to say no, because it could be perceived as a loss of control, that they're giving you kind of the keys to go off and go rogue. And so you might need to reassure them that, look, the content is all going to be mapped to these actions of the Climate Smart Community Program, which is something that the board has signed on to. So it's all right there. It's not like you're going to be going off and doing things willy-nilly. It's all flows back to the Climate Smart Community Program. So that might be a way to reassure them. And also, as Chow mentioned, it's a big job to build an entire website. You can keep it simple, but you'll find there's more and more that you want to add to it, and then it becomes your responsibility, right? Like they said in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. It's on you to be responsible for the tech side and the design side and the content and proofreading and making sure all the links work and everything. So it can be a big project. And then lastly, you're going to need to convince the town to pay for it, and it's an ongoing cost. It's not just a one-time cost. And I'll get a little bit more into the cost details. So yeah, the cost for a standalone site is going to be about $150 to $200 annually. That's if you're using like a Squarespace or a WordPress where you're building it yourself on that platform. Domain registration itself is about $20 a year, kind of depending on the appeal of the domain itself, but about $20, I'd say. And it's a recurring cost, meaning it's an annual amount. But let me just tell you a little story. Here in Rhinebeck, I built our own climatesmartrhinebeck.org site on Squarespace. And I was showing the clerk, like, look how easy, it's lovely, it looks great. I'm not like a web designer. I was able to use their templates. And I can just update it and, press update and it's live on the web. There's no, there's no third-party vendor that I need to like get on the phone to ask to update something. And turned out the Village of Rhinebeck's official website was being managed by a third-party vendor, like an IT vendor. And the Village of Rhinebeck was paying over $4,000 a year to have this guy anytime a piece of content needed to be updated, he was charging for it. And it's just with these tools like a Squarespace or WordPress, it's not, it doesn't make financial sense anymore to do it that way. And the website looked like it was from 1997. So like you can get a much more professional looking website where people can find things easier, and it can cost less. So I don't know to what extent you all want to like open up that whole can of worms with your town, but there might be an opportunity here for it to be a win-win. And there might be a way to show your town board that there's a better way, a new way, because these tools are, I look at the websites and a lot of them feel like they're from the late 90s. So yeah, from $4,000 to under $400. That's my story. There's some other considerations I wanted to bring up. And I guess that branding and usability is kind of what I was just talking about, right? Like that you want something that looks professional, that's up to people's expectations for what a website looks and feels like and how you navigate it in this day and age. And people they ain't gonna spend time on a website if it looks like a janky thing from 1997. They're just not gonna engage with it. So that's my push for doing that might, let's be real, like that might be your biggest motivating factor for why you want to do a standalone site. So think about the context here. It might be worth having some conversations, doing a little bit of research about else is going on in the town that is of a piece with the Climate Smart Communities program. There might be the waterfront committee, there might be the environmental committee, or your CAB or conservation advisory committee, and there might be other things that to the average lay person in your town, they all they don't know the difference between the CAB and the CSC and the ECC. So maybe those are things that you can package together in a standalone site under the heading of climate and environment and sustainability or something. Maybe it's not Climate Smart Communities Hurley, but maybe it's Sustainable Hurley, and underneath that you have these like a few different committees. If that's what makes sense for your town, I think that is a way for you to build alliances with those other committees. What I'm saying is it might be a way for you to create a more cohesive experience for your townspeople, and be a way for your different committees and projects to kind of lean on each other and form an alliance. And I think that is definitely something that you could consider, because I don't think it makes sense for each committee to kind of have its own little website. That might get unwieldy. Well, in terms of pricing, I went with just the personal site. I didn't feel like with the business site, there's more bells and whistles that I didn't feel were really necessary for what we were trying to do. So yeah, we just have like the most entry level for Squarespace. Paige, do you want to speak a little bit about your experience with Austerlitz? Because I know you ended up having this kind of conversation with other committees and decided to join forces, right?
Yeah, you mean we made it more of a general website? Yeah, exactly. So we weren't a task force yet. We were a climate committee. So we decided to do this as a climate committee website. So we weren't climate smart. We wanted to make it broader. So we also include the clean energy communities description and just generally the activities that we're doing. And we also went through a process where we had to convince our town supervisor, and everyone was a little reticent about not doing it on the actual town website. But they eventually came around, and we're excited about that because we feel like it's so much more of a tool we can use.
Yeah. I think that with Squarespace, I'm not sure about WordPress, but I think you can have multiple editors. So you would be able to have your Squarespace account, and say you could have someone who's like the designated editor for the waterfront committee, and they can update their pages, you know what I'm saying? But I guess this is kind of my last point here is kind of related in that you want to be thinking through this stuff so that the name of the URL speaks to, speaks to the whole thing, and maybe not just like, I don't know if I would have it be like, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I should, instead of climatesmartrhinebeck.org, maybe it should have just been like, sustainable Rhinebeck or resilient Rhinebeck, and then CSC is like one element, and then there might be others, other elements to that broader vision of climate and environment. But at the very least, a big tip here is don't use any acronyms in your URL. Don't make like CSC co-opaque, because nobody knows what CSC is. Spell it out. It'll be better for your search results as well. And again, just a reminder that domain is going to be, you have to kind of rent that domain every year. So have that be something that that your town clerk sets up and puts on auto renew. If you get permission to do this, it's got to be in like the auto renew. Okay, so kind of getting back to what's required to get points for this, and to set yourself up for success. Again, here's what's required. And I translated that into like layperson's terms for you. So this is kind of like a quick and dirty cheat sheet for what to put together and what to pull together to get started. And so your assignment is to do just that, to put together sort of your first draft of what your content is going to be. So I'm not asking you to like launch a website by April 29th, but for your presentation, I want you to have done the work to pull together your content. I'm gonna say you all have to go on a photo shoot and come up with at least a few images that you can use on the web page or on a website. And bonus points for you if you want to go ahead, and I think there's even like a free trial with Squarespace if you wanted to just like play around with it and start mocking things up. A free trial meaning like you don't have to pay anything, and it's not live and public on the internet, but you could I think you can make it like password protected and show us or take screenshots of what you put together. So at a minimum, you're just prepping your content so that when you're ready to proceed, whether it's a web page or an entire website, you have a good starting point. And again, if you go to this session page, this is all kind of chunked out as assignments. Okay, now on to social media. And so as I said, we're going to just kind of dip our toes in the waters of social media, because it can be a whole art in and of itself, really. So it is something that you can get points for Climate Smart, but again, not required. And the bar for getting points is real low. It just says you have to update at least once in the year prior to your filing. And then the content just has to be related to your Climate Smart community projects. So it's something that I think would be pretty easy for you all to get started with. But then to really take it and use it as a tool to engage with your community is going to take some more effort. So we'll get a little bit into that. So most of you are just getting started. So you can see there's kind of a mix of results here in terms of where you're at with social media and what your plans are. So considering that we're all kind of first dipping our toes in these waters and getting started, I thought maybe I'd just share some do's and don'ts for social media. So in terms of, one of the first questions I often get is, well, how often do I need to be posting? And I would say, you know, the Climate Smart Community action will give you points if you post once a year. But I'd say if you're posting to social media once a year, you ain't doing it right, and you're not going to get that much out of it. I would say ideally a few times a week, or at least once a week. And in terms of timing, like some people are like, well, what day of the week should I post? And I think there's different kind of rumors and theories on like which days are the popular days on social media. But I would just say, you know, keep it simple. Just don't post like late at night when people aren't going to be, you know, on their phones. I think lunchtime is a good time to post, when people are, you know, kind of on their lunch breaks and scrolling through their feeds. And in terms of the content itself, you want to keep it bite-sized, you know, concise. Sometimes I, you know, will look at people's social media and they have these like long screeds in their captions, and it's like, well, just I don't think people are accustomed to reading in depth on like a little social media caption. So you might see people doing this like link in bio thing, where in your bio you can set up something called a link tree, where then you can link off to a web page where you could go into something more in depth. Again, this is why it's nice to have your website or your web page, in addition to your social media. So you can prompt people, if you want to know more, go read more where all the info is. In terms of imagery, like I'm gonna say you want to keep your standards high. You know, keep in mind this is a visual medium. People are gonna unfollow or scroll right past you unless you get some pretty pictures. And so make sure if you're doing an event or you're even doing a meeting, like take pictures, take a lot of pictures and edit it down, choose the best ones and keep those standards high. And you know, beautiful landscape shots, of course. People love that. People who love nature love that. But don't underestimate, you know, having pictures of people's faces and people doing things together, because part of the point of this is showing that people are taking action, right? And people, I don't know, people gravitate towards faces. And then in terms of by behavior, I mean, like, how are you interacting on social media? How are you spending your time? You want to, you know, use a little @ and then mention the username of people in your community. You could even do profiles of people in your community who are doing climate related work, members of your task force, and give shout outs to the community groups that hopefully you'll be collaborating with. And that's how they will get the notification that that you posted about them and included them. But it's just like also a nice way to kind of like get some people chatting on your social media. And you know, spend your time not just doing your, you know, if you do like a once a week post, also spend some time following other people and liking what they're putting up, because then you're going to get a sense of what other people are doing, but they're also gonna notice you and hopefully follow back. So yeah, following other climate smart community task forces on social media and other community groups like your public library or maybe even your, you know, your school environmental club or what have you. In terms of don'ts, I would say, again, you are a municipal project, right? So you have to be mindful of not introducing any conflicts of interest, and not coming off as too salesy of any particular company or product. And you know, I think that what we're doing is by its nature a little bit political, but again, you have to be mindful that you are representing the government, so you don't necessarily want to be calling out individuals. for what you think is not good. Yeah, and then finally, like I think some people feel a bit timid about using images that they find on the internet. I think with social media, like it's really fine if you do, as long as you mention and give credit to the person that originally posted it. And you can tell when something is sort of like posted because it's almost like a social media flyer that they want others to share and repost. So I thought it might be interesting to kind of dig into what are the different types of social media posts, and I'm hoping you guys might have ideas for other types of social media posts. So of course, events and educational programs that you're doing are really good fodder, and social media can really help get the word out about these. So promoting in the lead up to those, and driving people to RSVP, as well as like live, this is happening now, come on down. And then after the fact, here's what we learned. We did this vulnerability workshop. Here's what we learned. Here's our big takeaway. Here's a picture of people in action. And then click, link in bio to read the full vulnerability assessment or what have you. And in terms of, let's see, what else? Yeah, tips. I mean, that also gets back to this idea of actions that people in your community can take to fight climate change in their own lives. You can share little bite-sized bits of info or ideas, drop nuggets of knowledge, and then what they can do about it. That's a great thing to share on social media. And then, yeah, like highlight other people that are doing good work in your community and use your platform to shine a spotlight on them, and ask them to repost to their followers. And that's another way you can kind of start building an audience through like-minded people and organizations. So this feeds into your assignment for the next couple of weeks. Again, all this info is on the session page. I want you all to create a login. And I'm going to recommend Instagram. I like Instagram better than Facebook. I think a lot of the people that are doing this kind of work in the Hudson Valley are on Instagram. And I'm going to ask you to create a login. Ideally, you've thought about your website URL if you were to have your own standalone website, and it's your username is of a similar vein. And then I'm going to ask you to follow other CSC towns around the Hudson Valley, and other organizations that we did in the other session where we were talking about what community groups might be good for you to collaborate with. You can find them on Instagram and follow them. And then for your presentation on the 29th, I want you to just bring a couple screenshots of posts that you thought were really cool, of other climate smart community task forces or organizations, climate organizations that you think are doing a good job with their social media that caught your interest. And maybe even, think about the typology here and see if you can find any other types that I missed. And we can talk about that on the 29th. If you already have your social media up and rolling, you're welcome to share some of your posts that performed well. And we can do like an analysis of why we think they performed well. Yeah, so hopefully by this time, 2 weeks from now, we will all be on social media. If you want to start posting, go for it. But I think it's good to kind of like start greasing the gears and scoping out what other people are doing first. So this section I'm going to handle like a little bit differently because I don't think I think this will be a good one for us all to set up, and we can do it in time for the 29th. And it's pretty easy to set up an email newsletter. It's just a lot of little steps. So actually what I've created in this section is, you know, I have some pointers and stuff, but then it's like a step-by-step tutorial walkthrough. And so I have the slides already up on the session page. You can open up those Google Slides, and you can even, if you open them up, you can see my notes. I kind of like wrote out everything in the notes as well, is what I would say. Yeah, so it's, let's start with the bad news. You don't get any points towards your certification for email newsletters, which I think is funny. Only websites and social media, but not newsletters. But I really think that this is another tool that's going to support you in the documentation that you're going to be doing for the other actions. So say you put on a, you know, say you put on a climate action planning workshop, you would send out an invitation to your email newsletter subscribers, saying, you know, giving the date and time and description of what you're doing, and an RSVP button. You can screenshot that, and that is one of the things that you might upload to say, look, this is something that, an action that we did that we should get points for. So it's like it's a good supporting element in your certification, bronze certification efforts. So yeah, most of you are not yet settled on a email newsletter service. I think a couple of you said that you have a supervisor who would let you kind of tuck into his newsletter, which I think is great. And I think one of you, no, but yeah, sorry, I thought one of you had already set up your newsletter, but not yet. So I think this is something that, you know, functionally speaking, you want to be able to inform and engage, especially with the people who are most interested in what you're doing, interested enough to subscribe to a newsletter. Like, you want to be feeding them information and ways to engage with you. And if you didn't have this, what would you be doing? Just emailing them all from your personal email doesn't make much sense. So it's really, if you've never used an email marketing, I think it's called email marketing platform, it's really quite handy. So some do's and don'ts. You never want to, you know, say you have a friend who, oh, I run the environmental club at the library. I'll just give you a spreadsheet of all the people that subscribe to my newsletter. It's a nice offer and very tempting, but actually illegal. You're not supposed to sign anybody up unless they've explicitly said they want to be in your newsletter. And doing stuff like that is a really quick way for you to start getting marked as spam, which kind of defeats the whole purpose here. You want to, not unlike social media, keep it conversational and fun and bite-sized, okay? People, you know, have a hard enough time reading their email. They're not going to read a whole long block of text. So you chunk it up into little bite-sized pieces, and then, you know, click to link more. Again, this is where you'd be driving traffic back to your website. And in like the marketing industry, they call it a CTA, the call to action. It's nice to be able to funnel the energy of your readers into a button, a shiny button for them to click, where you're asking them to take this quick survey, or RSVP for this event, or sign up to volunteer on this subcommittee. Having something that, you know, put the most important stuff at the top with that button. You really want to be clear about your hierarchy of information. You want the most important stuff to really pop out. People also ask, well, what's the frequency of an email newsletter? I'm going to say, you know, once a month is good. I wouldn't explicitly brand it as like our monthly newsletter. because then you're beholden to that. But I think once a month is good, maybe a couple times a month, maybe quarterly at a minimum. But I wouldn't start sending emails every week. People are going to get fatigued by that and stop reading them, start tuning them out, or worse yet, unsubscribe. You know, I think the other thing I wanted to know about your content here is, like, again, try to translate things into lay person's terms. Don't use that jargony stuff that we're going to start using now that we're in this governmental program, all of the acronyms and stuff. Try to keep that to a minimum and use just plain engaging conversational language. You know, those subject lines are important, but try not to get too spammy. It's got to catch their interest in their inbox, but it really should be related to the content of your email. Otherwise, and not too many like exclamation points, or I think that actually feeds into like the algorithm in the email providers that you start to be marked as spam. Okay, so I swear I'm not trying to sell any one of these particular products, but I see Constant Contact and MailChimp most frequently when we're thinking about small businesses, startups, community groups, and nonprofits, because they're really easy to use, and they're maybe not for managing like huge, massive email programs, but they're what you call a freemium model. Has anybody heard that term before? Yeah, so it's just a business model that a lot of companies have now, where you can start using the tools for free, but if you start hitting a certain threshold, like a certain number of email addresses in your database, or you want access to more advanced tools, then you're going to start, they offer you, well, you know, upgrade and start paying whatever monthly fee. But I use MailChimp, and I think our Rhinebeck list is like, you know, it's under 150 people, maybe 130 people or something. And I'm sending out an email, you know, once or twice a month, but I'm using it for free, which is pretty awesome, pretty good deal. I put in Squarespace here because if some of you are thinking of having a standalone site on Squarespace, I think they offer some email newsletter tools built in there. So that could be something for you to consider, just keeping it all consolidated on one platform. And there might be, that might be a good option. So we're almost out of time. So I'm gonna like spin through these really fast, but these slides will be here for you for when you go and you set up. I'm gonna do MailChimp. And if you wanna go set up your MailChimp and prepare your first email newsletter, you can refer back to these slides. So my first tip here though is don't set this up with your own personal email, because this is something that ideally, you know, maybe you want to be delegating it to one of your task force members. So use that climatesmartrhinebeck@gmail.com or climatesmarthurley@gmail.com, whatever your shared email could be. And that way other people could sign in. Another kind of pro tip here, at the footer of your emails, you'll see there's like an auto-coded, auto-generated footer that will auto-populate in a mailing address. And you don't want that to be your personal mailing address or street address. You want that to be the town hall. And just so you know, the reason why that's there is I think there's actually some laws or regulations around spam, where this is a signal that you're an actual entity with a real street address. You're not just a spam bot. So put in the town hall address there. Let's see. Okay, so a little shortcut that I set up for you all. If you go to the session page, you'll see that there's a spreadsheet with all of our email addresses. So I'm going to ask you to import those as the start of your baby newsletter as a shortcut there. pro tip, if you ever get error messages, you just need to clean up your data. You should have a column for first name, column for second name or last name rather, and a column for your email addresses. Okay, and in this tutorial, I show you how to build a template, which ends up being a nice little shortcut. So you don't have to create an email totally from scratch each time. Chow, you're very lucky. You have a logo that you could pop into your template. This is something I wanted to recommend to the group. Maybe this is something you can put a call out to your community and see if there's any graphic designers who could create a logo for you. And then I go through how to pop in all of your content in your templates. And then you're going to create an actual email. Let's see if there's anything else I really wanted to mention to you all. You can see the slides. Oh, another nice thing is in Mailchimp, at least, I'm not sure about Constant Contact, but it has you can edit your photos in there, so you can crop them, you can do like some filtering, so you don't necessarily need to have like Photoshop in order to manipulate your photos in a basic way. And again, getting back to like the hierarchy of information, you want the most important stuff at the top. You can slide these modules up and down and rearrange their positioning on your email. And yeah, so what we're going to do is have you set up an account and import the preliminary contacts and actually mock up an email and send it to the group. And so that's your assignment prior to the 29th. Oh yeah, one last thing about email newsletters. With these tools, they give you some pretty cool like basic analytics where you can look at, you know, your open rate, your click rate, and you want to be monitoring the trends over time. You want people to be, you know, if you're getting like 10% open rate, that's not so good. But I think I think the industry standard is something like 20% open rate. So just something to be mindful of is like not everyone's going to open your email. But you want to try to stay consistent. You know, 50% is actually really good. And you can actually go in and see what is it that people are clicking on. Were there any particular images that were compelling to them or projects that were compelling to them? So it's something to like keep an eye on your analytics. Okay, so your assignment for this, again on the session page, you're going to set up your email newsletter and send out your first email.